Welcome back to Machines Inc. I'm Jake, and today we're going to be diving into steering on my Jeep XJ. So there's a few things that I want to address on here. First and foremost, I am not getting full steering lock to lock. Second off, I want to convert everything to high steer to get all the steering components up and out of the way of the rocks as much as possible. And then lastly, we're doing all this to go ahead and prep for hydro assist steering. So I just want to make sure that I have all my steering linkages in the proper orientation before we put on that hydro assist. So once we do that, everything is just done and complete. Now, on my Jeep XJ, I have a Wagoneer Dana 44. Whenever I built this axle and swapped it into the Jeep, I never really addressed that I wasn't getting full steering angle. So that's what we're going to be tackling today. And hopefully, if you guys want to swap in a Wagoneer Dana 44 to your Jeep XJ or TJ, this will help you guys kind of figure out all of the steering that you need to set up to be able to get full lock-to-lock steering and have good steering geometry on the car. So let's go ahead and dive into this, start tearing apart this axle, and get it all ready to rock. So I got lucky and my buddy Jesus actually hooked me up with a free knuckle that was already machined and drilled for high steer, as well as the high steer arm that bolts to the top of the knuckle. So appreciate you, Jesus. And also he's got a really rad LS swapped XJ, so I'll drop his Instagram tag down below right here. I went ahead, cleaned these up, painted them, and prepped everything to be able to throw some new ball joints in here, and also drilled everything out for 3/4 inch bolts, which is what all my Heim steering is using. So now that we have this knuckle all prepped, it's time to slam new ball joints in there, start tearing apart my Dana 44, and swapping that new knuckle on. Now with our wheel removed, it's time to start disassembling this hub. So first off, we're just going to unbolt the brake caliper, hang that up out of the way. Then we're going to come in and remove the locking hub. And behind that, we're going to remove the 2 locking spindle nuts that hold this whole hub and disc brake assembly on here. That's going to give us access to then remove our axle shaft and unbolt this knuckle so we can swap on our new high steer one. Now, to remove this hub assembly, you will need a specialty tool. This is a 4-prong tool that's called a spindle nut tool, and essentially these 4 prongs will click into that spindle nut to allow you to pop it off of there. Definitely a necessary tool if you are going to be tearing apart a Dana 44. If you're swapping out a knuckle on a Dana 30, those ones do not have manual locking hubs, so you're just going to need a 36mm socket to undo the locking nut that's on the end of the axle shaft. So this whole high steer project has definitely taken a little bit of a turn. Initially, my idea was to throw on this high steer knuckle, use my existing steering components, and hopefully everything was going to kind of bolt up. But so far, that is not turning out to be the case. First off, I did initially plan to use the inner hole on the high steer knuckle for my drag link. And not only did that cause a lot of interference issues with steering linkages and axle components, but also I realized that that was going to give me a little bit too much steering angle. So after a little bit of research, I found kind of the golden idea is you do want your pitman arm length to be the same as your knuckle length. And when I say knuckle length, I refer to the length between the ball joint to the mounting point for the drag link. So I did a little bit more research, found out that the Jeep Wagoneer steering arm is the proper length that I need, and it actually bolts right onto the Jeep XJ steering box. So I picked up one of those for cheap and popped that on. And now we can run our drag link on the furthest outboard hole on the high steer arm. So that did clear up a lot of issues we had in the beginning. Now moving forward, the only thing we have left that high steer arm is definitely contacting is my sway bar in link. But I think we're going to be able to relocate that without affecting the performance of that sway bar too much. So that's kind of next. We're going to cut that link off and kind of test clearances and go from there. And then lastly, now that I've moved the tie rod to above the knuckle mounting point, it is contacting not only the sway bar end links, but also the coil buckets. But I think I have an easy solution for that. Barnes 4-wheel drive actually sells a 1-inch offset Heim for the steering. So I ordered some of those. They should be here later today. And once I toss those on, I think that's going to make my tie rod clear completely on all the steering. So fingers crossed, because that would be a super easy solution. But let's go ahead and get to it, start yanking some of this stuff apart, cutting a few things off, and welding it back on. All right, so we finally got this thing all set up, and it actually came out way better than I was thinking. So let's kind of go through everything that I did, and hopefully this will help out any of you guys if you are looking to swap a Dana 44 into your Jeep. First off, we started off with the high steer knuckle. This knuckle is essentially the same knuckle I had prior, but the top is just machined, drilled, and tapped to be able to bolt that high steer arm onto it. So we installed that, installed the high steer arm, and then got to mocking everything up. And that's when I realized my whole plan was not gonna work whatsoever. Going back to the drawing board, starting to mock everything up, I realized that I wasn't gonna be able to use that inner hole on the high steer arm, and I did need to use the outer hole. And that brought us back to our original issue of not getting full steering angle. So after doing a little bit more research, I realized that the Wagoneer Pitman arm not only is the correct length that I need, but it also bolts directly up to the Jeep XJ steering box. And this is the same steering box in Jeep XJs, TJs, Durangos, I think WJs. So this will work for almost anyone that's swapping in a Dana 44. Once I got that Pitman arm and got that bolted up, then I started mocking up my drag link to that outer hole on the high steer arm, and that's when I ran into a bunch more problems. First off, I realized that my drag link was too long. Second off, it was smashing into the sway bar end links and end link mounting points. So I had to cut off those sway bar end links, move them a little bit more inboard on the axle, and this gave me enough room to be able to steer all the way lock to lock without smashing into anything. Then I did cut and shorten my drag length by about 1.5 inches. Essentially, I just ground out the weld that was holding that threaded bung in there, cut that drag length, and then re-welded the bung back in there. Then past that, moving down to the tie rod, I wanted to move the tie rod up above the knuckle mounting points just to get it as high and out of those rocks as possible. And when I did that, I realized that the tie rod was smashing into the coil buckets, sway bar end links, a whole bunch of things. So I had a couple options. One, I could bend that tie rod, which I really didn't want to do. Or second, I looked on Barnes 4-wheel drive and they actually sell some 1-inch offset Heims for steering to accomplish exactly what I needed. So ordered some of those. Also, quick shout out to Barnes, not a sponsor or anything, but they have some amazing customer service. All their guys are super knowledgeable, super nice, and can't say enough good things about them, so thanks. But moving on, got those new Heims, bolted those up to the tie rod, and that solved all those issues. Then after all that, it was time for a final cycle. So put it all the way at full bump, all the way at full droop, steered left to right in all those scenarios, flex it out, and everything completely cleared. So we are finally ready to rock and roll. And honestly, this project turned out even better than I thought. By swapping this Wagoneer pitman arm and then to the high steer, it put my drag link perfectly in line with my panhard bar on the exact same plane, to where if you're looking at the front of the car, you almost can't even see the panhard behind it. The reason you're looking to do this is as the axle moves, if they're on two different planes, this is essentially going to create bump steer in the vehicle, and it's not going to be the best steering geometry. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. It drives much better now, and I'm pretty stoked. Couple last things. You guys probably did see all those orange markings all over a lot of the suspension components. That is torque paste, and essentially I use that after I tighten down all the bolts. You put a thin glob of that across the nut that you tightened, and that is an awesome way when you're on the trail, you can do a quick visual inspection, and if you see any of those orange globs cracked or broken, that means that that component has come loose. So I love doing that, just so when you're on the trail, if you think something's feeling a little loose or funny, you can do a quick visual inspection and see exactly what's going on down there. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. This has been a couple weeks of hobbling this all together, and sorry if the video doesn't exactly make sense, but if you have any questions, definitely drop them down below in the comments. I'd love to help you guys figure out your projects at home. Definitely stay tuned to the channel if you guys want to see some hydro assist steering being installed on this Jeep later on. That's going to be a video coming up. As always, guys, really appreciate you watching. If you guys do want to follow me on Instagram, I am at MachinesIncJake. If you guys enjoyed today's video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more 4x4 and off-road content, definitely subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.